Hello, everybody. Welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. Nick Palavita, I will be your moderator for today's show. And for today's show, we're going to have some very exciting topics, which apparently are hitting the press. We're going to be discussing Social Security, and we'll hit the press because they figured out when the trust fund goes bye-bye in, or part of it, in 2032. Inflation, which apparently seems to have a big impact on elections. In other words, who you're going to vote for is based on your gas prices. Medicare, which is also has a fiscal problem in 2033. So we have a 2032 crisis, a 23 crisis, an immediate crisis with inflation, and then the national debt, which we're spending $1 trillion a year on interest. So with that, we brought in the eminent scholar in this area, and hopefully since Congress looks like they're going to form a committee now to go over these problems, and they're looking for somebody who's not part of Congress to go on. Hopefully this gentleman will get the job, and that's none other than the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States, who's only been discussing this for about 20 years. And within the next 5 years, they're going to have to do something. So, David, even though you've been talking to them for 20 years, it's like you might as well be talking to the wall. But in the next 5 years, the brick wall will hit. They can't ignore this problem. So it looks like Congress is thinking where they're going to try to actually get a committee to do something about it.
Well, Nick, it's good to be with you. I think I just read something on social media, but you may be able to confirm it while I'm on, that Alan Greenspan may have just passed. And if that's the case, obviously may God rest his soul. And it's relevant to the topic that we're talking about today, because I remember in 2001 when Alan was chairman of the Federal Reserve, and when the Congressional Budget Office had projected that we had surpluses as far as the eye could see, and that we were possibly going to pay off all the national debt, that Alan was very worried about it as chairman of the Federal Reserve, because he thought that would end up limiting their ability to manage monetary policy. I wasn't worried about it for a nanosecond, because I know how Congress works. They're focused on today rather than tomorrow, and excess money burns a hole in their pocket through the floor and almost through the planet. And as we've said many times on this show, things really started spinning out of control in 2003, and I won't go into more depth right now. But Alan's also relevant to this topic because he was chairman of the so-called Greenspan Commission. And that was the commission that was created in 81, made recommendations in 83 that ended up resulting in Social Security reforms. You may or may not recall that we were within weeks of the Social Security so-called trust fund going to zero in 1983. And if it had gone to zero, then there would have been a 25+% across the board cut in benefits, which is obviously not acceptable from a number of different reasons. Here we are, fast forward to 2026, and it's deja vu all over again. In the end of 2032, we're expected to go to zero, and the Retirement and Survivors Trust Fund, absent action, that will result in a 22% across the board cut, which is obviously unacceptable. And the real question is, when's Congress going to do something about it? Are they going to wait to the last minute, or are they going to end up forming some type of commission, either for Social Security alone or in conjunction with a broader challenge with separate recommendations for Social Security versus everything else? There's a big debate about whether we just throw more money at it, which I think, while I think additional revenues are going to be part of the Social Security solution, we're going to have to end up looking at a number of other things in order to ensure successful sustainability over time. And this time we're going to have to consider known demographic trends, which, quite frankly, the Greenspan Commission did not adequately consider. The question is when, and my personal view is the best chance for us to create some type of commission, which I advocate for, is after the midterm elections. And I'm hopeful that will end up happening. irrespective of what side. The sooner we act, the better. The less changes we have to make, the more transition time we have, and the better confidence that the American people will have in their government, because it's very low right now. But let me just mention a couple other things, and then we can go in more depth on these topics. International things. One, Prime Minister Starmer from UK resigned, primarily for three reasons. He wasn't viewed as having had successful stewardship over the economy, over energy, and over immigration. Secondly, we have a tenuous agreement with regard to Iran. The three things that the U.S. is focusing on is making sure the Strait of Hormuz is open, making sure that Iran does not have the ability to build a nuclear weapon, and trying to be able to get Iran to quit funding its proxy forces, in particular Hezbollah. Regime change is totally unrealistic. You can't do that from the outside. You can't do that from air power. That's got to be done from the inside. And the last thing I'll mention from a domestic standpoint is, I think I mentioned this several weeks ago, but it's been reinforced. Up until 2 to 3 months ago, Trump was doing better on every major economic metric as compared to where things stood when he took office on January 2025. But today, he's doing worse on virtually every economic metric. And that, in large part, is due to what's happening over in the Middle East, the impact on energy prices, that rolling through the economy, as it relates to goods and services. Obviously, there's been a reduction in crude oil prices. They're now in the upper 70s. When I looked this morning, that's down significantly from triple digits not that long ago. But, we need to see how this thing is going to settle out, because while the United States clearly prevailed militarily, from an economic standpoint, what's going on is not only important to the U.S. with regard to prices, but not supply, but for the rest of the world, both as to prices and as to supply. So that's kind of an overview. And we can also talk a little bit about what causes inflation, because a lot of people don't seem to understand what causes inflation. And I think Americans are finally starting to understand that one of the drivers of inflation is excessive deficits and debt levels. But it's one of several. So that's kind of an intro, and let's go from there.
Yeah, I just find it interesting that the big driver in Americans' mind isn't these long-term but systemic problems like Medicare, debt, Social Security. Instead, it's what hits them now in the pocketbook, which is going to the pump and paying more in gas. And there's all of a sudden,
Well, Americans, look, Americans aren't very good at learning from history and learning from others. In addition to that, Americans tend to be very myopic. They tend to focus on the here and now, and their elected officials tend to focus on the next election rather than the next generation. And that results in doing a lot of things that may or may not have short-term gain, but all too frequently has long-term pain, which is exactly the opposite of what you need to do in order to get in shape. And that's why, if we expect for Congress to reform Social Security, reform health care, reform the tax system, reform immigration, reform education policy, some of our big challenges in the regular order on a piecemeal basis, it's ridiculous. It ain't going to happen. And that's why we're going to have special mechanisms like statutory commissions. And we're also going to have enforcement mechanisms like constitutional constraints in order to force the Congress to make tough choices and to stick with them over time.
Yeah, I did see a bipartisan bill going through Congress that is to create a commission. So maybe we're heading in the right direction.
There's two types, Nick, and again, we're not going to make these changes without some kind of commission. Congress is totally dysfunctional, and there are two proposals. One is the Fiscal Commission Act, which exists both in the House and the Senate, and it has bipartisan support. And it's designed to deal with the overall fiscal challenge, not just Social Security, but also getting debt to GDP down to a reasonable and sustainable level over the next 10 to 15 years. I've been a strong advocate for that, but I've also been a strong advocate to say that they ought to have two sets of recommendations, one for Social Security standing alone and one for everything else to get debt to GDP down to a reasonable, sustainable level for several reasons. One, AARP, who's the 800-pound gorilla, who's feared on both the Republican and Democrat side of the aisle, they don't want Social Security handled as part of the overall fiscal challenge. That can be dealt with by having two sets of recommendations. And secondly, under the Senate rules, you can't consider Social Security reform on a fast track basis, and you can't avoid a filibuster. And therefore, for that very substantive reason, you need to have a separate set of recommendations, because for the other reforms, which quite frankly are much more challenging, they're going to need to be done on budget reconciliation to avoid a filibuster and only require a simple majority vote. The second commission was just introduced last week, and it's for Social Security standing alone. But I don't believe there's a Senate version that's been introduced. In addition, they don't have nearly as much bipartisan support for that commission as the Fiscal Commission Act. But in any event, while we're going to need a commission, one or more, I don't think anything's going to happen until after the midterms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is very reasonable. Now, in terms of the international problems, we do have our international panel here. We have Sasha Starr, who's joining us from Canada, and we have Dr. Sharif, who's joining us from Bangladesh, and Kim Calhoun, who's joining us from the United States of America. So I guess these problems over here, they really don't affect people over there, but we'll ask Dr. Sharif, do people in Bangladesh really care about our Social Security, Medicare, inflation, or the national debt? Four issues that we're discussing.
Actually, for with Bangladesh and USA, we have a very good relations. Even presently, like all of the trade and commerce and business relationship, political relationship, and everywhere, so we have a very good relationship with uh, USA. I just want to share, let's say, about our Bangladesh audience. Last Friday, I attended in Chittagong Engineering University. It's the largest business incubation in South Asia, and they regularly follow our podcast, especially our economic affairs. Hundred of brilliant peoples, and they care about USA. Why not? Definitely, we do care about USA. But one thing, what I understand, because last 17 years of time, I travel or try to learn from all of the Ivy League university, Cambridge, Oxford, and everywhere, and try to engage with the people to understand the people. So, honestly speaking, definitely in terms of smartness, perhaps Americans are best people in this planet in terms of economy, in terms of technology, in terms of social security act, democracy, everywhere. Americans are best nations around the world. But one thing I have a question. That's why I started this program with California Institute of Management and with Tando and so on. Like empathy and sympathy, leadership based on wisdom, economy based on wisdom. America has a lot of money, lot of talents. They are all of the intelligent peoples. But what about their leaderships, the political leadership? They are wise. They are wise enough to contribute for the humanity. They are wise enough to contribute for this 90% of the American peoples. They are wise enough to contribute for this developing the new economy, what I call like this wisdom economy. We do just run our investment and everything, some point AI, then globalization, then this and that, then Hollywood, then NASA, and all of the big things. What about humanity? What about human wisdom? Who run your society? Who run your countries? Who run your economy? Who run your universities and your banks and everything? We need people who has wisdom, empathy, sympathy, and they can work from heart and mind. This is absent in the American politics. That's why you need better politicians, better politicians, better policymakers who has wisdom, with sympathy and empathy, and they can work from heart and mind, that they can feel about the people. That is my understanding. I want to
Well,
learn more from
let me give you some
their
feedback.
worker and so on.
Thank you. They're very thoughtful comments. I'm in the process right now of writing my fifth book, and I'm doing it in partnership with a gentleman by the name of Joe Penland Sr., who's a very successful entrepreneur in Texas. Not as wealthy as Ross Perot Sr. was, but nonetheless cares about Social Security, our financial situation, and uh, what things are going to look like for our children, grandchildren, and in his case, great grandchildren, if we don't change course. One of the things that we talk about in the book is that while the United States had way more than its fair share of great leaders at the founding of our republic, who, by the way, studied history, studied the experience of others in coming together with a number of things, including arguably the greatest political document in the history of mankind, the United States Constitution, which is not perfect, never will be. That's why we continue to strive to form a more perfect union over time. That's why we've had 27 amendments. That's why we need more amendments. But at that time, we had way more than our fair share of great leaders. Now we don't have our fair share of great leaders, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Number one, we now have something called career politicians, where people are running for office and they want to be politicians for life. That is not what the founders intended. The founders intended for people to come out of society from a variety of backgrounds for a temporary period of time to do public service and to go back. Uh, in addition to that, we now have two major political parties where the duty of loyalty to party all too frequently trumps, no pun intended, the duty of loyalty to country. And our nation's founders, most of the major founders did not want factions or political parties to form because they were concerned that that would happen. The duty of loyalty to party would trump duty of loyalty to country. At the beginning of our republic, our leaders were focused not just on today, but creating a better tomorrow. They believed in the concept of stewardship. Stewardship, as we know, is not just generating positive results today, not just leaving things better off when you leave than when you came, but leaving things better positioned for the future. The baby boom generation, my generation, is failing in that regard. So we need fiscal reforms, we need political reforms in order to revitalize a republic that will truly be representative of and responsive to the general public. That's not what we have today. That's what we need. And some of those will require constitutional amendments. Things like term limits, that will require constitutional amendments. Things like campaign finance reform, that will require constitutional amendments. But there are other things that can be done legislatively to create more competition while ensuring equity through redistricting, and a variety of other issues, integrated and open primaries. Uh, so we need both. We need fiscal reforms and we need political reforms because the big challenges we face, we're at stalemate. That's not acceptable. It's not sustainable.
Very good. Very well spoken, David. But of course, you're kind of out of politics. So when you left, I think
I'll do public service, but I have no interest in running for political.
Yeah, I think what happened when you left, leadership and wisdom left the room at that point in time. So it hasn't been back in Congress. But let's see what our neighbors to the north, Canada, think about the great United States of America. I know Sasha has his opinions.
Thank you. Your conversation is about what has to be done and what's the problems or what's on. Sometimes I was catching myself that what country are you talking about? Are you talking about United States? Please. United States is being run by enormously questionable person at the role. And it's at least if he would be a passive, just biding his time, get his 80th birthday, 250th birthday of the United States, and this election, midterm, and so on. Okay, so okay, he's biding his time. He's the president. He's whatever he wants to do, he does. The problem is that he, together with Netanyahu, they made incredible blunder. It's not even blunder of the century. It's probably blunder of thousands of years, where they started the war knowing that they cannot commit to the all-round operation, including uh, the army on the ground. They knew that they will not be able to do it. And without that, they cannot change regime. They cannot get this Iranian enriched uranium if it exists. Nobody knows now where it is and what it is. So, okay, so therefore, all goals of United States or Israel or both, they are they were unachievable from the day one. So if that's the case, how is it? Okay, I understand that Israel, it was maybe mostly in their interest to have this war because Iran was preparing for its ultimate attack on Israel. So Israel was almost had to do something about it. The United States, okay, so they had several months ago successful campaign against Iran. All of that, Trump says everything was obliterated, their uranium, the enrichment targets, the facilities, everything was obliterated. Okay, so now they started attack on 28th of February. So in a few days, again, everything was obliterated. It was Iranian army, Iranian float, everything was obliterated. So if it is the case, so why you couldn't get their capitulation right away? Keep bombing them every hour and a half until they will ask, okay, we are ready to sign capitulation. Just do it. You started something, you just, maybe it's a wrong idea to begin with. But if you're already there, go all the way. Be a man. No.
Let me respond. First, uh, there's no question the United States has significantly degraded the military capabilities of Iran, basically obliterated the Navy, significantly diminished the Air Force. It's not just with regard to their platforms, but also their military industrial complex, their ability to be able to replace missiles, to replace drones and things of that nature. At the same point in time, there are limits to what you can accomplish through military power if you're not willing to put troops on the ground. And I don't believe that the president is willing to put troops on the ground. And quite frankly, I don't think we should put troops on the ground unless it is a very limited and targeted special forces operation like we did in Venezuela. What they didn't give adequate consideration to, in my view, is Iran's ability to choke off commerce through the Strait of Hormuz, and the resulting impact that would have on global oil prices, on inflation overall, on the adequacy of supply for countries that rely upon the Middle East for oil. We don't, but many countries in Asia and Europe do. And obviously that has a hardship on them. And it's not just oil; it's things like fertilizer and other products that come out of that region. My personal view, Sasha, is we you can't trust Iran. You can't change a regime with air power. Okay, that's got to be done from the inside. If you're not willing to commit troops to go in, and I don't believe we are, and my personal view is that we should continue to bomb them until we achieve what we want to achieve. And my personal view is we should take Karg Island. But by taking Karg Island, I don't necessarily mean taking it with troops. I mean obliterating Karg Island so that is 90% of their energy operation goes through Karg Island. That will have serious adverse impacts. And people will say, well, what will that do to the oil supply? Iran supplies about 4% of the world's oil. That can be made up by the United States, by Saudi Arabia, by Russia, by a number of other countries. It's not material. But believe me, that more than anything else would likely result in the capitulation of the regime.
David, you know what the problem is that if you listen to Trump's points. First of all, he changes every hour and a half. One day he says that they are gentlemen, they are our friends. I'm talking about the Sears, those militant groups that rules around. They are gentlemen. We are talking to gentlemen. Then an hour and a half later, he says, unless they will agree to this or this or that, we are going to bomb all of them, we're going to kill all of them, and so on. So it's very difficult to have successful diplomacy, especially with such experienced party as Iranians are, with 1,000 years of history of diplomacy and so on. It's very difficult to do things. Now, there is a card that Trump signed agreement which he cannot deliver. He cannot deliver the Lebanon-Israel part of it because this is completely controlled by Israel. So how Trump can sign something that he cannot deliver physically or any other way? So this agreement is stillborn. It's not going to happen from the day one. So what are they discussing in Switzerland for 60 days, and they can prolong it for another 10 days or 25 days or 75 days or 2.5 years? What is agreement is this? What is it for?
I'm skeptical, but I'm willing to give diplomacy a chance. And my personal view is we're going to have to go back and make them pay a much bigger price. And I believe the key is Karg Island.
And you know what? You just you spoiled the Iranians. Now they believe, first of all, they won the war. Second of all, they're saying, oh, wait a moment. We want to get our ships out. And they already actually sold a lot of oil since Hormuz Strait was open. It's not really open. It's open for Iranians. But okay, so they can able to sell some more. Now now they're saying, wait, so you're talking about you want this, you want that. Oh, did you mention $300 billion going our way? Where is the money? Where is at least $10,000 of this money that you can feel, touch, make sure that it's there? Where is that? Bring it with the money. Talk to me. Bring the money. And only then we're going to talk to you, okay? Bye-bye. So what is it?
Sasha, my understanding is the vast majority of that money is their money. It is money that has been locked up, that they haven't been able to gain access to because of various sanctions. There's no way the United States is going to give.
Wait a moment, David. I'm pretty much sure that you're mixing two things.
Okay.
You're right. There is Iranian money which has been locked, and they have to release this money sooner or later. But $300 billion does not include Iranian money. This is money coming from U.S.-led coalition of the Gulf states, such as United Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar, and all others. So this money, sooner or later, within 60 days, will have to materialize. And it's not going to happen in one day, $300 billion. It's okay, so you put $100 billion in some bank account, okay? It's there. Okay, here's a 50 more, so it's 150 now. So the money have to start building up on some kind of account. It's not happening.
Yeah, here's my understanding, Sasha. And again, we don't have enough of the facts, okay? And so there's a lot of speculation. My understanding is several things. One, not one dime of American money. Yes, you are correct. There's two kinds of money. There's the money that's Iranian money,
Yes.
locked up that presumably will be released over time based upon conditions. And secondly, there is a separate pot of money which would be provided by a coalition of countries,
Yes.
not the United States, primarily Gulf countries. And now what's being talked about in Switzerland is what would the conditions be to be able to access that money. And one of the things that they're talking about is to be able to restrict the money to be able to be used for things that will benefit the Iranian people, food, things of that nature, infrastructure that will benefit the Iranian people, and that providing that money would be tied to making sure that it's going to certain types of activities. But here's the problem. Here's the problem. Money is fungible. All right. And so therefore, if you say, okay, we're going to give you money for food for your people, we're going to give you money to repair some infrastructure or whatever, not U.S. money, other people's money. Okay. Well, if you give them money for that, then they can use the other money that they have for whatever they want.
David, do you
Right.
remember brilliant movie, The Other People Money? This is exactly what we are discussing. Iranians are too shrewd to fall for this bamboozle. What they're going to say, you're talking about $300 billion. Show me $1 billion. Where is that? In which bank? Where is this money lying? Show it to me, because if you don't have any money. Just go away and don't talk to us anymore. They are too shrewd to fall for this other people money scenario. They want to have money, feel it, touch it, and then we're gonna talk.
There's another movie called Jerry Maguire, which you
Yeah.
and one of the famous lines in that movie is, "Show me the money."
Tell me the money.
You got it.
Yeah. Well, I have a bit of a problem with the 300 billion from the Gulf states. Why would the Gulf states make a contribution to a country that just bombed them? I mean, retaliate. This whole thing doesn't make any sense.
It's a buying a possibility not to be shot out next time. They know that United States cannot defend them. They cannot even defend their own military bases. So they know that. So they have to buy from Iran the possibilities that Iran is not going to shoot at them anymore. So $300 billion, maybe it's a reasonable price to pay. But still, where is the money? Money has to be somewhere. They have to have a bank account that Iranians can check. Okay, today there is $100 billion. Okay, tomorrow $125 billion. So they can see what they have to work for. Because if you're talking about $300 billion, next day it's going to be $500 billion and $5 trillion. It doesn't make any sense, and Iranians too shrewd not to understand it.
All right.
Well, maybe
There's-
Rausner can make some
Or
sense.
there's another source of money that will be flowing to Iran. Iran has figured out through this that they can charge a toll of, I don't know, 0.5 to 1% on the value of the oil flowing through the strait. Annually, you've got $500 to $600 billion in oil flowing through there. So if they charge 1%, they can make $5 billion. That's a new business for them, a $5 billion a year business.
My understanding, Rick, is that one of the red lines is that there will be a free flow of traffic with no tolls. That's a red line. That's my understanding. Okay, but
well, that would be good.
Because the concern is, there are other choke points around the world.
Yeah.
For example, there's a choke point at the at Gibraltar, getting into the Mediterranean. There's a choke point in the South China Sea. There are several choke points, and what the concern is it would set a terrible precedent that could end up proliferating in other parts of the world. Now, technically, it's my understanding that if you look at the Strait of Hormuz, half of that belongs to Oman, half of it belongs to Iran. Okay.
Right. The southern tip is Oman.
Right. But my point is that technically they are the territorial waters of those two countries. However, there's something called the law of the sea, and there's a treaty with regard to free flow of commerce, internationally. Now, although ironically, I think that there's some countries that aren't signatories to that, including the United States.
David, do you remember 1956, a war about Suez Channel between France, England, and Egypt?
That was
Okay.
part of the downfall of the UK.
Right. And who controls today Suez Channel? It's Egypt.
Egypt.
Egypt controls it. So why the hell Egypt can control Suez Channel and Oman and Iran cannot control Strait of Hormuz? What's the difference?
Well, one of the differences is the land on both sides of the Suez Canal is part of sovereign territory of Egypt. That's not the case with the Strait of Hormuz.
Oh, okay, fine. So in Hormuz, instead of
In other words, internally, it's like a river, okay? It's like a river. It's like the United States, and the Mississippi River.
okay, so instead of one country control both ends, here you have two countries. So they split the proceeds. If they agree among themselves, and I don't see why they won't agree, then somebody will say, okay, United States of America says, hey, we disagree, we don't want you to take any money. But United States has nothing to do with Strait of Hormuz. It's a water which is part of it Oman and part of it Iran. There is no one else. If there would be a third country, so it would be three-way split. But there is only two. So how you can affect that both countries will say, okay, we are not going to touch it? No, it's not going to happen.
I think, Sasha, one of the issues is Canada doesn't need the energy coming out of the Gulf. We don't need the energy coming out of the Gulf. One of the things that needs to happen is that the countries who do need the energy that's coming out of the Gulf, they need to get more engaged. They are
to fight Iran, to bring their armies to fight Iran.
No. They need to be more engaged with regard to demining. Okay, they need to be more engaged with regard to opposing any efforts by Iran and Oman to try to restrict international traffic, to try to impose tariffs, if you will, or tolls, or call it whatever you want, on the free flow of traffic. I mean, they need to be more engaged. I'm not talking about militarily. Remember, the Western European nations said that they would get more engaged once the fighting stopped. The fighting has stopped. Where are they?
It's not their war, David.
Well, but it's their oil.
And okay, let's talk about actual money. Iran is very reasonable, imposing only $1 per barrel. So if the barrel is today, what is it, $77 a barrel? So it's going to be $78 a barrel. Add $1. So instead of 77, you're paying 78. What's a big deal about it?
The answer is it's immaterial. It's called the principle of the thing.
With Iran, you take your principles and put it in one place, where. Iran will dictate. They won the war. They understand the weakness of America. They cannot put ground troops on the ground, and without that, they can control anything. They cannot achieve anything. So they're in command, and they are too shrewd people not to understand that. So they are going to threaten to stop all the agreements and all the negotiations and so on. And America will have to come back to the table because they had midterm election coming in, and they have this 4th of July thing and all many other things. Iranians know all that. Iranians play against these things. And America, you know what? Just capitulate. Just get out of there completely. And that would be the less painful result of this unfortunate war. You know what? It's just sometimes when you play, sometimes it's a payback time, baby. So let's see, you play chess or you play blackjack in a casino, and you feel it's not your day. You're going bust. Dealer gets 21. What you have to do? Okay, I stopped playing for the okay. Tomorrow is another day. Maybe I'll be lucky. United States are not lucky. That's the problem of United States. They have a very peculiar figure as a president who starts the war, he stops the war, he wants to this or that, and so on. You're unlucky. Okay. Remember, I got it from The Godfather. Remember when Mike confronts Mo Green, and Mo Green says, "What are you saying that I'm skimming up the portion of the profits?" You know what Mike says? No, you're just unlucky.
Well, I thought you were talking about the horse head. I guess we could make that happen, you know. Horse head in their bed.
Oh, just a point of order or reference here, David. You are correct. The U.S. did not sign the United Nations Law of the Sea, so U.S. is not a party to the UN Law of the Sea.
I don't think Iran is either.
Yeah, they could never get the 2/3 majority to agree in Congress. So we do not have a treaty with anybody when it comes to the sea. So it's kind of it's a U.S. free for all.
It's a little bit ironic because the world relies upon the U.S. Navy disproportionately to assure free navigation globally.
Yeah, our law of the sea is the U.S. Abraham and the U.S. Gerald Ford. So that's kind of like it. But there is no formal document or treaty or law of the sea that was ever signed by the United States. They've been talking about it since 1994.
Nick, but do you know that today's all the agreements and memorandums and treaties, they are absolutely worthless. Absolutely. Yeah. So why would you worry about all treaties that was not signed, was not approved? What doesn't make a difference?
Sasha always had a problem with international law courses because who's going to enforce it always becomes the issue. And how are you going to enforce it? So you're going to sign these agreements, you know, you have enforcement issues. And the international courts that they have in The Hague are really
the U.S. doesn't follow any international laws or treaties. The world has tolerated the U.S. not signing any of this stuff, A, because of no enforcement is available, and B, because we used to behave fairly reasonably. Now, if we start doing crazy crap all over the place, does the world, what happens?
All right, a couple of things. I've got to go, but before I go, you guys can continue the last 15 minutes. Two things. One, memorandums of understanding are worthless. Okay? It's got to be a much more formal document. Secondly, agreements that are not ratified by the Senate in the form of a treaty are worthless. Okay? A perfect example of that is the Budapest Agreement between the UK, Russia, the United States, and Ukraine, which was not a treaty, was an agreement, was only as good as the president who signed it. By definition, we have new presidents, every 8 years at least. Okay, if you will. Thirdly, whatever you have, whether it's a treaty or whatever, if you don't have an enforcement mechanism, it's not effective. All right. And so we need to learn those lessons. Kim, you got something real quick? I've got to go.
Yeah, David, I wanted to thank you for doing all of this and answering a lot of our questions, because we do get misinformed, and it's good to have these conversations. But I want to bring up your book that's coming out real soon, and let's try to have a bigger conversation about that next week, because I do believe it's getting ready to be published soon. When do you expect it?
I expect it'll be published by Labor Day.
Yes. All right. Something new to read for upcoming holidays. So that is awesome. Thank you. But let's definitely have a bigger conversation about some of the things that because this is a lot of research that you put into these books. So let's try to have bigger conversations about that as well next week.
Thank you. The tentative title of the book is Saving Social Security and America. Common Sense Solutions.
And people need to consider the ripple effect and consequences if Social Security does fail our system, it can impact the rest of the world because of the way people are spending money and the way that revenue recycles itself in our society. So we just need to be a little more considerate about what's happening in a society as big as ours is that relies on the Social Security system.
Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
If the Social Security benefits were cut 22% across the board because we don't reform it, because that's what has to happen under current law. I don't think it will happen, but if that happened, it's 1 to 2% of GDP for every state in the country. Believe me, that's not acceptable. Y'all continue.
Thank you very much. And that's a very scary thought. And we need to put some things in action, definitely. I don't know about y'all, but I mean, I selected to receive Social Security a year after my husband died because they had me believing that it was to my benefit to wait. But when I crunched the numbers, I realized it was to my benefit to collect, and it actually helps me survive. You know, one of the reasons is I had to then adjust the way I was receiving income for a while and not receive income in order to get the IRS off my back. But and again, I won the IRS audit, but I had to just have a low profile and no income. So Social Security came to my aid when I needed it. I can't imagine losing any percentage of it right now. And the way it has been working is that it has increased a little bit every year to go with the cost of living. Our cost of living, you can't reduce Social Security and people who rely on it be able to sustain. It's just, actually, you can't sustain on Social Security alone if you have any other house bills. I'm just saying it's not that big of a check.
Well,
And
you're not making
Medicare is a joke. Don't even get me going there. And we do have a Medicare show every Wednesday. I think it's at 1:00. But every Wednesday we have a Medicare show discussing ways to pick your Medicare if you've had to go through that process. It's not easy. It's a scam. Medicare is the biggest scam in the country.
But you know what? I'm surprised that, Nick, on these shows, you very often here and there, you're discussing Medicare and social insurance problems. You see, the problems do exist. There's no doubt about that. The problem is that you are saying it on this network, which is listened mostly by the same people as we are, and no one can do anything effectively to change anything or improve anything. No one. It's even the government cannot do anything. I mean, they can, theoretically they can, but if they are worried about just keeping their seat and nothing else, I doubt that they will ever do anything about it. So I really don't understand then what's the point? I mean, what we are discussing, it's horrible, it's terrible. I mean, okay, we can talk about it for, say, 45 minutes, hour, 2.5 hours, 5.5 hours. What's the goal?
Well, I think, Sasha, it's the impact. In other words, there's a guy named Ray Dalio. You may be familiar with him. He founded Bridgewater and Associates, and he created a statement about this problem. And he's on LinkedIn, and I think he's a billionaire. If not, he's pretty close. And he created. He talked about these problems of Social Security and Medicare and the national debt, three big hoops that the U.S. has to jump on. And I'm thinking, well, why would he discuss it? It's because these three things will have an impact on all of our listeners in the United States.
Here's what's going to happen.
In the next 5 years.
Here's what's going to happen. The U.S. has the ability to print more money. We have a ton of bills. We have the interest on the national debt. We have Social Security. We have Medicare. We are just going to print money fairly steadily to cover our debts, which is highly inflationary.
Highly inflationary.
So we're going to be locked in to significant inflation for the next couple decades.
Okay, that model ruined Venezuela. That model ruined Argentina. So what you're saying is that we're going to commit financial suicide because we're not going to address the problem.
Possibly, yeah. But I
Well,
mean, if we can,
possibly it did.
if
Look
we
at what
can
happened to
keep now,
Argentina.
when you're talking Venezuela, Argentina, you're talking 20, 50, 100% inflation a year. If we can keep our inflation to 3 and 4% a year, it's still a huge tax on everybody.
Yeah, okay, but you cannot do that by printing money. When you start printing money, you're just going to create inflation. Now, there are some things they can actually do. One is to lift the cap. And Americans who are high income taxpayers all know about the cap. This year it's 184,500. If you make above that, you don't pay into Social Security anymore. It's gone.
Well, no,
right?
once you've paid your portion up to 184, you pay like everybody else. But if you happen to make $1.5 million above the 184,000, there's no Social Security tax.
There you go. There you go. Okay. There you go, Rick. Okay. And by the way, if you study the tax system, it is written by people that have lobbyists in Congress in their favor, who are usually on the higher end of the income and net worth statements. That's the reason 1% of Americans, in case you don't know this, Dr. Sharif, have 40% of all the assets, and the top 10% have about 80 to 90%. So you only want to talk to a very small group of people in the U.S. because the rest of them are busted.
It's called, there's two names for this. One is regulatory capture. The other is the golden rule. People who have the gold make the rules. Regulatory capture is when rich people buy enough of the government that the government does what rich people want.
Yeah, and the average American is very, very ignorant on taxes. Like I said, Rick, when you were in college, how many tax courses did you take?
None.
No.
I didn't know shit. And my dad was a CPA for 6
Your
years.
dad's a CPA, so he would know.
I still didn't know shit because I didn't pay attention.
Right. And so, but the problem is that like even in high school, they don't offer tax classes, and the Social Security wage base, by the way, they lifted it on Social Security, they lift on Medicare. So you pay that. Here's the other problem. And by the way, these are simple problems to solve, except wealthy individuals don't want this solved because it hurts them. The other one is paying Social Security on interest and dividends. Now, this was explained to me by my CPA 20 some years ago. I said, what? He goes, well, you want to cut your income down and pay out dividends and interest on your Schedule K1 on your S corporation. I said, why do you do that? It'll save you 15.3% every year. And you know who's a big beneficiary of this right now? Elon Musk. Okay. He doesn't pay the 15.3%. He pays it only on the 184,500. What about the rest? He doesn't pay jack. But he's not the only one. It's every person in that. And they are the ones that are writing the bills. And when I was in Congress, it was really, when I was working for I'm not an official lobbyist, but I was with the NAFA group, which is a huge lobbying group, and it's the 12th largest PAC in the United States. And we were writing checks to congressmen. Okay. I mean, that's how it works there. And then what happens is we actually would write the bills. We'd write the bills and give it to them so they could present it before Congress. So this is the system that the US has going on. So what happens is they don't want the correction model that you're describing. What they want is the middle class and the working class to pay it.
So one of the things,
one
of the things that should happen, and it was something that Nick and I were advocating when we first started in the media industry many years ago, almost 10 years ago, Nick. 10 years ago. So, but we, moved the meter a little bit because there for a while they started doing it, and that was getting financial literacy put in place in our education system. But I believe that not one student loan should be issued to anyone until they have taken a class on financial literacy, on taxes, and on how that loan works. Because that has been the biggest scam in this country is when they've handed over massive amount of student loans to children, who couldn't qualify for a car loan if they wanted to, or a home loan, which is the size of a student loan. But these loans you can't get out of them. They're exit proof. So once you get the money and you're in the loan, and the rates are adjustable or have been for the past few years. Now, I noticed that they've just passed a student loan law, and supposedly, or they're passing it, they're trying to reduce everything to 2% flat rate. And but they've also capped how much students can get. They can only get $20,000, where $20,000 won't pay for the first semester of most universities. We will no longer see doctors coming out of America. Now, my advice to people is go become a citizen in another country and apply to come here for free, because they still have that program.
We have two long-term, there are a bunch of long-term trends. One is we're not making enough babies anymore, which means, and also our education system is in a shambles. AI is wrecked. You no longer get a bump compared to just a high school graduate leaving college. It's less easy to move straight from college into a good paying job. So you're not getting educated. You're not getting a bump in income. That is effing up the education system. Thing two is not enough babies, which means that, well, on the good side, it means the consumption around the world by people is going to start dropping in the 2030s, just because there are going to be eventually fewer people, and we make tech more efficient. So less gas used by people, but then AI comes in, starts eating all the energy. But to get a picture of the world, you got to look at all these long-term trends. No babies, U.S. growth, population growth, lowest level in history, close to 0%, about 0.2%. So we're not being overrun by immigrants. We have net, almost negative immigration now because Trump has been such a dick to the rest of the world.
Young adults can afford to have children and pay off their student debt. They can afford to be educated to get an income, but then most of them get educated and can't get a job because AI has replaced them.
This generation,
I mean, it's just a bad circle of life right now.
This generation, Gen Z, Gen Z is screwed. Gen Alpha is probably screwed, which comes after Gen Z. But then, well, I guess Gen Beta comes after. After a while, these next generations, they are smaller and smaller. They start inheriting more and more because there are fewer of them, because everybody's so distracted by tech that they forget to have sex and make babies.
Yeah, and also what happened in 2005, there was a law passed called the Bankruptcy Abuse and Consumer Protection Act. Notice it was a complete lie. What did the law do? The law made it, how you say, your student loan debts not to become dischargeable in bankruptcy.
Non-charged off debt.
That's right. It could never be discharged in bankruptcy. So if you get a student loan, it is hooked to you until you die. And so the thing is,
after too, probably.
Oh yeah. The real problem is that, again, everybody who's listening to this and every child who goes to college and every advisor should be telling them this law makes your student debt non-dischargeable. If you want to go to school, put it on a credit card. They can discharge it in bankruptcy. Put it somewhere else. You can discharge it in bankruptcy, but don't get a student loan. It's non-dischargeable. And so the thing is, when these laws get passed and the Americans are ignorant of it, then they just get slammed. But unfortunately, we're slammed out of time. So I want to thank, obviously, the Honorable David M. Walker and also our guest in the United States and around the world. And we'll see you next week on Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker.
Take care.
Bye.